have steadily strengthened trade and investment ties with other BRICS countries alongside collaboration in areas like development, skills, technology, security, and innovation. South Africa has benefited from the new development bank, which was established by BRICS countries in 2015. Our country has been funded by the bank in several infrastructure projects to the value of 100 billion rand in sectors such as roads, water, energy, and transportation as well. South Africa has always championed the interests of Africa within BRICS. To further advance the African development agenda, more than 30 heads of state and government from across our continent will be attending the summit at our invitation. We want to build a partnership between BRICS and Africa so that our continent can unlock opportunities for increased trade, investment, and infrastructure development. There are great opportunities for other BRICS countries to participate in the African Continental Free Trade Area by locating production and services in various countries on our continent, including our own, by partnering with local companies and local entrepreneurs. The 15th BRICS Summit will discuss a number of issues, including the important issue of the possible expansion of the membership of BRICS. More than 20 countries from around the world have formally applied to join BRICS, and several others have expressed an interest in becoming part of the BRICS family. South Africa supports the expansion of the membership of BRICS. The value of BRICS extends beyond the interests of its current members. For its efforts to be effective, BRICS needs to build partnerships with other countries that share its aspirations and perspectives. An expanded BRICS will represent a diverse group of nations with different political systems that share a common desire to have a more balanced global order. In addition to other African leaders in attendance, we will also be welcoming leaders from several countries of the Global South whom we have invited. These include countries from the Caribbean and South America, from the Middle East, from West Asia, South Asia, and Southeast Asia as well.
Welcome to my channel. So today we are looking at BRICS, the BRICS Summit and its impact in Africa and even the world. So as we are speaking, several countries have been added to BRICS, including Ethiopia, Egypt, and even Middle East countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and even Iran, Argentina of South America. They have all been added. So BRICS provides another platform for African countries to negotiate economically. Therefore, BRICS is more of an open door for Africa to leave behind the Western-controlled unilateralism and to embrace multilateralism, which means that there are many options of economy, finances, and even investment and partnership in the world apart from the West. The West here includes IMF, World Bank, etc. So expansion of BRICS shows that many world countries are showing interest. Because even though about 6 were added, but reports showed that about 40 countries had applied to join. But for now, this time, only about 6 have been added. So what's the impact of this BRICS and the expansion of the 6 members? How does BRICS impact world trade? Because the world trade since the end of the Second World War has been controlled by the West. IMF and even World Bank and the West, they have been controlling the world trade. So currently, there's a change happening. And Africa is waking up to this. That's why countries like Ethiopia, Egypt, and many others had applied to join BRICS. Which means this shows that African countries are considering other options apart from the West. So we are not saying that the West is bad, but in a world of trade, competition is important and beneficial. It reduces monopoly and makes competitive prices for commodities. So BRICS, as a competitor of the West, will help Africa get better prices and even safeguard territorial trade areas. So for now, addition of Saudi Arabia, UAE, and even Iran, which are all energy giants in the Middle East, shows that BRICS itself is really much concerned about safeguarding energy interests. So like these experts are saying here, economists, that inclusion of Saudi Arabia, Iran, and UAE and Egypt, which are all based in Middle East and they all have energy, someone can argue that BRICS is becoming very Middle East centric. That's just an opinion by Sanusha Naidu, who is a senior research fellow. But more strategically, and adding these countries shows that BRICS is more geoeconomic, geostrategic, and geopolitical. So these countries have a lot of energy. Like Saudi Arabia is the world leading energy producer. So some are saying that this makes BRICS to be very energy centric. Adding that, they can even call BRICS plus OPEC. This shows that BRICS has taken in energy giants. So therefore now BRICS looks to safeguard energy interests and resources, because the world trade and development is very much sustained by energy and oil. Even at this time, Saudi Arabia they're trying to negotiate with the US. The US is begging them to allow them to pay for oil with dollars. Of course, Saudi Arabia had refused, but they're still negotiating. This shows that the world is changing. And America and the West, they need to adapt to this change. Because BRICS has now taken over Saudi Arabia, and even Iran, and even Egypt, and even UAE, out of the grips of the West. So all those energy reserves, they'll now be under BRICS control. And Africa is supposed to wake up to this and align itself with the global partner that gives Africa better trade deals. Gone are the days when the West called all the shots. So now, BRICS will even help African countries to avoid and even eliminate sanctions by the West. Because some of the West sanctions are some of the ways where the West uses to control many countries and sovereignties. So BRICS is an important milestone, and as time goes by, its impact in global trade will be seen much more. But Africa is gradually waking up, and there are instances of African countries, they are calling for multilateralism. They are calling for African countries to be open-minded, not to be focused only on the West. So let's look at even Uganda. There's a speech by Uganda President after they passed that's LGBT law. The World Bank and the IMF, they cut off their aid to Uganda, which shows that if African countries only rely on the West, then Uganda, for example, can be starved. But now BRICS provide another alternative to countries like Uganda and Africa, that if the West cuts aid to Africa, then Africa can opt for BRICS Bank and BRICS financing, etc. To show that the world cannot be controlled by only one mindset, which is Western. So let's look at the speech of Museveni, of how he defiantly said that Uganda will not be forced to beg. But first, let's look at this report by Uganda, how Uganda reacted when the World Bank suspended their aid due to that LGBT law that Uganda passed. So try to imagine if there was no other alternative financing. There's only World Bank and IMF like 10 years ago. Then Uganda will go the Zimbabwe way. They'll be starved. Because those years, it was only World Bank and IMF. If they reject you, your country will starve. And that's how Zimbabwe ended up suffering economically in the days of Mugabe. Because Mugabe went against the Western standards and they sanctioned Zimbabwe. And to date, Zimbabwe is yet to recover. So luckily for us, we have BRICS. That's why even Museveni is able to say defiantly to World Bank and IMF, you can keep your money because we will not be dictated by your values. So this is 10th of August. Uganda President defiant after World Bank suspends aid funding to Uganda. So Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni on Thursday denounced the World Bank's decision to suspend new funding in response to that law, and Uganda vowed to find alternative sources of credit. Maybe here they'll consider BRICS and others. So the country also promised to revise its budget to absorb this impact. So they'll remove some costs. They'll cut some costs. So the World Bank said on Tuesday that the law, which imposes death penalty on those acts, contradicted its values, the World Bank values and the West, and that it will pause any new funding until it will test measures to prevent discrimination in projects it finances. So the World Bank has an existing portfolio of $5.2 billion in Uganda, and all these projects will be affected. So the West has really opposed this LGBT law by Uganda. So Museveni said in a statement that Uganda was trying to reduce borrowing in any case and will not give in to pressure from foreign institutions. So they'll not be bullied by the West. He added, it's therefore unfortunate that the World Bank and other actors dare to want to coerce us into abandoning our faith, culture, principles, and sovereignty using money. So they really underestimate all Africans, Museveni said. So Museveni says that Uganda will need to borrow, but it will also tap other sources, and that Uganda's oil production will start by 2025 and will provide additional revenues. But he hoped that World Bank will reconsider its decision. So Museveni is defiant. He's saying that the West and the World Bank will not coerce Uganda to passing this law, which is against Ugandan culture. And Uganda will look for other sources of finance. Also, they reduce their cost and their budget, and they'll not budge down to be forced. So this is how the West operates. They use this kind of World Bank loan and IMF to force African countries to adopt other conditionalities which only benefits the West. Apart from such kind of laws, World Bank forces countries like Kenya and even Uganda to adopt things like retrenchment, privatizing corporations, which end up being bought by the West, etc. So it's this how many African countries have remained poor, and they have remained indebted to the West. So the entrance of BRICS provides another option, which will ensure that Africa is able to negotiate and to bargain. So because BRICS has its own financial infrastructure, this will force the World Bank to see it as a competition, and therefore World Bank will reduce its conditions and arrogance. And therefore, African countries and others will benefit, because competition benefits consumers generally. So let's look at what Museveni said, his speech concerning this World Bank. And as you can see, that Africa is now waking up.
That the whole of the African countries is just asleep, waiting to be saved by others. If they don't save us, we shall die, like happened with the slave trade. How can this be? Slave trade went on here for 400 years. These idiot chiefs were here just putting on monkey skins and so on, looking like clowns. So therefore, although this is bad, but me, there is a good thing in it, to wake up the Africans. Africans are a disgrace to ourselves. Why do you have to depend on the outside for everything? Life, you depend on the outside. Why? This pandemic, as the German professor was saying, has brought out some good efforts like this one here, but also brought out bad things in the world. However, me, I like the bad things. I like it's bad, but somehow it wakes up the Africans. Africans sleep too much. You know my orientation. I have never believed in independence. For the last 60 years, I've been struggling against that. In the government, when we were outside the government, in the resistance, we were always striving to depend on ourselves. Therefore, this unfortunate phenomenon where people have vaccines and they say, no, we must first vaccinate our own people. That's unfortunate, but I like it because it wakes you Africans. Africans are a disgrace to ourselves. Why do you have to depend on the outside for everything? Life, you depend on the outside. Why? So, even before this crisis, I was always struggling with our people. Ebola started here. We are the ones who suffered from Ebola. Why would anybody else develop the vaccine not of Ebola, not ourselves? Why?
So I know many people are wondering, how is Uganda and Museveni's remarks to World Bank and IMF, how is it linked to BRICS? You see, BRICS, why it's a big deal and why it is giving African countries confidence to make such decisions is because BRICS is a counter to the Western way of doing things. Because African countries have been exploited and looted since independence. In fact, African countries are not independent economically. Even the political leaders are just puppets of the West. So there has been a systematic looting and theft of Africa's wealth since independence, whereby raw materials are bought cheaply by the West, and then African countries are given debts and loans. So they end up not getting value for their money. That's why after all these decades, almost half a century, most African countries are still the way they were, or even worse than the way they were at independence. Because they have been all relying on the Western economic system like World Bank and IMF and those countries. So you see, BRICS is a new phenomenon. It is coming with a BRICS finance system, like a BRICS bank, that will counter World Bank and IMF. So in business, if there's competition, then the companies offering services will have to reduce their prices and make their conditions competitive to avoid being overtaken by competitors. So BRICS can be a competitor of the West. That's why even Africans are now waking up and realizing that, like we saw last week, like the Guinea leader said, that these minerals can be processed in Africa and sold as finished products in the West. You see, when Museveni is talking about Africa having their own vaccines instead of depending on the ones made by the West. So we have Africa Free Trade Area, which was also proposed in 2018 there, or 2017, but it has been slow to be implemented. And in fact, some African countries have not adopted it. This is like a trading bloc of the entire continent that will remove the trade barriers and allow them to trade easily with one another. Because trading with the West is Africa suffers because of the unequal trade balance. So with ideas like Africa processing their own minerals like gold, coffee, etc., they'll be able to sell them to fellow African countries that lack those resources fast. And that will ensure that Africans benefit equally. And then they'll sell them at a higher price to other continents that are not part of this free trade area. So part of waking up here means that African countries will join trade organizations like even BRICS, Africa Free Trade Area, any trade organization that benefits them. So the era of depending on the West only is gone. So Africa has many options. And I hope that apart from BRICS, even this free trade area will also be implemented and taken seriously by African countries so that they can safeguard the Africa trade borders. Africa can be a dumping ground for Western products. Like imagine even toothpicks are being imported. Toothpicks. Yet Africa has trees that can be used to make toothpicks. We even import toilet papers. That's why Museveni is saying that Africa is asleep and Africa should be ashamed of themselves. That's why Museveni is saying that Africa should be ashamed because they are lazy and they're depending on the West for everything. Even food, importing even rice. That shouldn't be the case. So this scenario shows that Africa is very rich. As you can see here, I think Africa is the richest continent in the world. 192 billion is stolen out of Africa each year. That's worth of minerals and resources. Stolen cheaply and easily. I know in this regard, you can't blame Africa because the West has been in power and they have used terrorism and other things to raid resources. So the idea of Africa waking up means that they have to use these resources for the benefit of the continent and the people. Crude oil should be refined in Africa and sold at a good price for the benefit of the country. The same with gold, uranium, etc. And maybe it's high time even Africa has nuclear plant because of the uranium resources. Mobile phone plants because of the cobalt, DRC, etc. But all this, they are just taken as crude minerals, and then the countries that process them are the ones that benefit, mostly the West. So BRICS will provide more bargaining power for Africa, and then it will help Africa wake up and realize its potential. Otherwise, the West will keep on running away with resources. So far, Museveni and the Guinea leader, they are showing the mindset of Africa, which will be adopted and emulated by others. that Africa should stop dependence on the West. And even if BRICS comes, Africa should also not depend on the BRICS the way they're depending on the West. Africa should be independent and should depend first on themselves. And then Africa should look at both the West and BRICS as external partners that we can bargain with on equal basis. Just like Ramaphosa was saying earlier, the South African president, that the era of unilateralism is over, so now it is multilateralism, whereby countries negotiate equally. So that's why the idea of the Guinea leader that Guinea's resources must be refined in Guinea. And then Museveni says that Uganda will stop borrowing, but they'll make their own industries and other things, and they'll cut their budget, remove any excess. Those are all ways of starting to be independent by African countries. So it will be unfortunate if Africa leaves the West and then again becomes dependent on China or BRICS. No. Africa must be independent first, self-sufficient, and then look at those foreign bodies, like even BRICS and the West, as external bodies that we can negotiate with on equal basis. So BRICS is a good idea. It's a challenge to the West and even the dollar. So that's what the world is currently. Africa is finally waking up. So the Western way of doing things, either they have realized or not, but their way of doing things is being challenged. The era of unilateralism is ending. So as BRICS is expanding, they're even taking some of the former allies of America, like Saudi Arabia. They've been taken over. French, they're losing their allies like Burkina Faso, Niger. They're all losing all those to Russia. That means that the world is becoming more multilateral. And Africa should become more confident and should stop fearing this West. But Africa should see them as equals. Equal partners that we can negotiate with on equal basis. So far it's a very exciting moment to be an African, because there's a waking up happening, and I hope it will be sustained. And we require strong leaders who are confident, who can speak the truth, like Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, or Colonel Mamadi of Guinea, Captain Traore of Burkina Faso, the Mali leader, and others. Of course, we have other puppets too, but I hope that with time, they'll see the wind of change, and they'll also get confident. That's all for today. Let me see your comment in the comment section. And if there's something else you want me to cover, you can let me know. But for now, Africa is waking up, and it's very exciting. So thank you very much.